Hey guys, welcome to the Young and the Restless exclusive news YouTube channel. Today's topics. For weeks, Genoa City had been cloaked in mourning and confusion, paralyzed by the brutal events that unfolded on the French estate once thought to be a haven of wealth, sophistication, and security. Damian and Chance had supposedly died, murdered in cold blood during a night of shadows and betrayal. Their lives extinguished, their legacies cut short by a blade and a plan no one fully understood. But while the town cried, while eulogies were whispered and suspicions multiplied, the truth remained buried far deeper than any grave. Because no one had ever actually seen their bodies. There were no open caskets, no identifications, only the murmurings of tragedy and the fast-spreading fog of manipulation. And now, as a whisper began to circulate through back channels and encrypted texts, as whispers turned to gasps behind closed doors, a new terrifying truth emerged. Damian and Chance were not dead. They were alive, barely breathing, when discovered, broken, battered, but spared from death by the unlikeliest of figures. Subscribe our channel for more latest update. A mysterious doctor whose name had been erased from all public record, whose skills seemed less medical and more miraculous, and whose motivations were known only to himself. That doctor had intercepted death, turned it aside with a scalpel and syringe, dragged two bleeding men from the jaws of oblivion, and placed them in a hidden ward deep in the French countryside, where no one would find them. Where secrets could be preserved, and vengeance could be planned. It had taken weeks for Damian to regain consciousness, his body refusing to cooperate as organs struggled, limbs spasmed, and every breath came at the cost of excruciating pain. Chance, too, teetered on the brink, having lost so much blood that his recovery bordered on impossible. But the doctor, still nameless, still operating like a ghost, persisted. He ignored all pleas for answers, spoke only in curt medical orders, and delivered results that defied logic. He was no ordinary physician. Rumors hinted that he might be someone expelled from traditional medicine for experimental methodology. Perhaps even someone once associated with covert military units or secret pharmaceutical programs. Whoever he was, he had saved them both. And now they owed their lives to a man whose face they barely remembered, and whose name they had never been told. But survival wasn't enough. Damian's first coherent thought was not of gratitude, but of fury. Fury at being hunted, fury at Cain, who had lured him to that estate under the guise of reconciliation and business. Fury at Carter, the assistant turned assassin, whose loyalty was a facade, and whose knife had almost silenced Damian forever. And fury too at the world for believing he was gone, for accepting his death without proof, for mourning a lie. Damian's heart burned not just for revenge, but for justice. For the exposure of a network of betrayal that stretched from Genoa City to Nice, from the halls of Newman Enterprises to the corridors of Jabao, all connected by one rotten thread. Cain, Chance, less emotional but no less determined, shared that thirst for retribution. A former cop with a code, a soldier with instincts honed in combat. He couldn't rest while his woodkillers walked free. Cain had pretended to grieve, to mourn, to protect Lily from the truth, while all along knowing, or perhaps orchestrating, the chaos that led to that deadly night. And Carter, whose transformation from loyal assistant to unhinged hitman shocked even the darkest minds, remained at large, manipulating events with chilling precision. But as much as Damian and Chance wanted to return, to storm the city with truth and rage and vengeance, they understood the stakes. Appearing now would be a mistake. Without evidence, they would be dismissed or worse, targeted again. They needed proof, records, footage, testimonies, something irrefutable. The doctor, ever cryptic, insisted they remain hidden. He'd constructed their current location like a fortress, biometric locks, underground recovery chambers, and only a single untraceable communications line. Food and supplies were delivered by third parties who never saw their faces. Every step they took was monitored, not for control, but for their protection. The doctor reminded them often, "You were not supposed to survive. If the world learns too soon that you did, they'll come to finish what they started." Back in G City, the ripples of their deaths continued to spread. Lily, still shattered, began questioning the inconsistencies. Why had the French police released so few details? Why had security footage from the estate vanished? Why had Cain's story changed subtly but suspiciously each time she asked about that night? Jill, sensing something off, pressed her contacts, but hit roadblocks at every turn. Victor Newman, always 10 steps ahead, had started asking questions of his own, particularly about Carter, whose background had too many redacted lines and not enough public history. And then there was Sharon, who had seen something in Nick's eyes, something haunted, something silenced. He had been present during the chaos and yet remembered so little. Was he drugged? Was he framed? Was it possible that he had seen Carter commit a crime and had been silenced, not with a blade but with a bottle? As paranoia grew, Carter moved swiftly to eliminate loose ends. He destroyed encrypted drives, erased metadata, and sent anonymous threats to anyone probing too deeply. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that someone had already copied the files before they were deleted. Someone loyal to Chance, someone hiding in plain sight. That someone was feeding breadcrumbs to the mysterious doctor, who, in turn, was preparing Damian and Chance not just for survival, but for war. The doctor's obsession wasn't merely medical, it was personal. He had lost someone long ago to a similar betrayal, and in Damian and Chance, he saw his chance for redemption and perhaps for retribution. He had a plan. He would release them, but only when the time was right. Until then, they would remain dead, their lives protected by the lie that had nearly killed them. But even in hiding, Damian's anger fermented. He would whisper Kane's name in his sleep. He would mutter Carter's every move. He remembered the coldness of the blade, the smell of the earth as he was dragged and left to die. He remembered how Carter had smiled while stabbing him. He remembered Kane's footsteps outside the room, the way he had hesitated, the way he had walked away. Dahman knew Kane hadn't plunged the knife himself, but his complicity had been deafening. And now he would pay. Chance, on the other hand, trained daily in the shadows. He practiced with makeshift weapons, studied maps of Genoa City, revisited floor plans of every property Carter and Kane had visited in the weeks before the incident. He wasn't driven by emotion. He was fueled by strategy. For him, this wasn't just about revenge. It was about restoring balance and, if necessary, taking lives to protect the innocent. And still, the doctor watched. Sometimes, in the dim light of their recovery chamber, Damian and Chance would catch him staring through the glass wall, his face obscured by shadow. Who was he really? A savior, a manipulator, or something far more dangerous? They had tried to follow him once to slip into his office, but the door was locked with a code they couldn't crack. All they knew was that he received packages marked with the symbol of a forgotten pharmaceutical company. One that had gone bankrupt after a scandal involving unethical experiments. The same company, it turned out, that once employed Carter under another name. So now the story becomes even more tangled. Damian and Chance, alive in the shadows, fueled by rage and strategy. Wait for the day they can walk into the city and let the world see the ghosts it tried to bury. Carter, drunk on power, blind to the trap being laid beneath his feet, continues to manipulate, unaware that his sins have awakened something unstoppable. Kane, torn between guilt and fear, begins to unravel, sensing that his past is no longer buried, but rising like smoke from the ruins. And the doctor, the one no one has seen, the one whose name remains hidden, tightens his grip on the story. Knowing that when the final curtain falls, it won't just be Carter and Kane who face the reckoning. It will be everyone who played a part in the lie, because death, once cheated, demands a debt, and the time to pay it is fast approaching. Ever since his return from Nice, Kyle had carried a weight that pressed harder with each passing hour. A secret wrapped in implication and betrayal, tangled deeply in the strings Victor had been pulling long before Kyle even realized he was a puppet. At first he told himself the silence was necessary, that Claire had just lost Cole, that the pain in her eyes was too raw, too exposed for him to add anything more. But as the days passed and the rituals of mourning gave way to reflection, the truth loomed larger than any shadow in his home. What had happened in France was not just unsettling, it was illuminating. Kyle had begun the trip thinking he was a man trying to reclaim purpose, to step out of his father's shadow, to finally prove he was strong enough to build a future of his own. But what he uncovered instead was the full depth of Victor's and the role Audra had been quietly, insidiously playing to fracture the one thing that brought Kyle any peace. His relationship with Claire. It started subtly, glances, suggestions, moments staged to appear coincidental. But Kyle wasn't blind. The patterns were familiar. He had seen the tactics before, often used in the business world. But now, they had taken on a new and disturbing intimacy. Wasn't just manipulating, she was orchestrating, aligning herself with Victor to exploit Kyle's grief, his doubt, and ultimately his heart. Her goal wasn't love. It was leverage. Victor wanted Kyle unmoored from Claire. The reasons were unclear at first, but they had become chillingly obvious. Claire had begun asking questions. Too many, too perceptive. She noticed things like the strange inconsistencies in Victor's stories or the shifts in his tone when certain subjects were raised. Her mind, her sharp intuition, posed a threat to the house Victor had spent decades building. He didn't want a curious outsider touching the corners of his empire, especially not one with the resilience and clarity that Claire carried even in her grief. So, he had acted and Audra had obeyed. That's what Kyle saw in France. Not just the depth of their collusion, but the length they would go to isolate him from Claire. And while he didn't have physical proof, the way Audra baited him, the way she pressed about Claire and veiled criticism, the way she orchestrated vulnerable moments and then recoiled in just enough manufactured virtue, it was all a pattern, one Kyle could no longer ignore. But returning home had not been the relief he imagined. Seeing Claire in mourning, her world fractured by Cole's death, had gutted him in ways he didn't expect. She wasn't angry, she was quiet. She wasn't demanding, she was distant. And in that silence, Kyle found every excuse not to confess. Every time he opened his mouth, her eyes would shift toward a memory he couldn't touch, a grief he couldn't undo. So he waited. But silence became a prison, and the truth became a fire he could no longer contain. Everything changed at Cole's memorial. Claire had been composed, gracious even, but beneath the surface a storm brewed. Victor had offered his condolences, but his posture had been cold, calculating. And Kyle saw the moment Claire truly saw it, too. Something broke. Later, when they were alone, Claire turned to him, not with tears, not with longing, but with rage. She was done, she said, with Victor's patronizing interference. Done pretending that his actions were ever about protection or guidance. She had stood by Kyle. And yet Victor continued to treat him like a liability, a weak link in the chain of power that the Newman family clung to like armor. And Claire had had enough. Her voice, sharp with betrayal, cut through Kyle like a blade, but not directed at him. She was furious with Victor, and in that crack of honesty, in that space where she drew the line and reclaimed her power, Kyle knew he could no longer withhold the truth. He told her everything. He told her about the way Audra had followed him, cornered him emotionally, how she had used their shared history as a tool of sabotage. He described the subtle gaslighting, the planted doubts, the strange moments where it felt like he was being tested, observed, catalogued. Most importantly, he told her what he'd come to realize, that Audra was not acting alone. She was working under Victor's directive. It wasn't just speculation. Kyle had overheard a conversation, short, clipped, and coded, but unmistakable. Victor had warned Audra that Claire was becoming too inquisitive, that Kyle's loyalty might waver, that emotional entanglements could undermine larger strategies at play. It was there, clear as day. Victor didn't just want Claire gone. He wanted Kyle manageable, and love made him unpredictable. Claire listened in silence, her expression frozen somewhere between devastation and vindication. She wasn't shocked, not entirely. Part of her had sensed it all along. The way Victor never truly embraced her. The way he veiled his disapproval in polite distance. The way he spoke of Kyle as if he were a child who needed guidance rather than a man worthy of choice. But hearing it confirmed, hearing how far it went, left her shaken. And then something unexpected happened. She laughed. Not with joy, but with disbelief, the kind of bitter laughter that comes when you realize your worst suspicions were an understatement. She thanked Kyle, not for his apology, but for finally trusting her enough to say it. And then she made it clear she was not walking away. Not from him. Not this time. If Victor wanted her gone, he would have to reckon with her staying. If Audra thought she could unweave their bond, she would soon find herself strangled by the very web she spun. Claire was done mourning. Cole's death had taught her something brutal and necessary. Life is too short for half-truths and hidden agendas, and if the Newmans thought she would be silent, pliable, easy to exile, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. From that point on, Claire and Kyle became a quiet force, united not just by love, but by purpose. They stopped explaining themselves to Victor. They stopped entertaining Audra's veiled provocations. They focused instead on rebuilding their foundation from a place of truth, transparency, and strength. And somewhere deep inside, Victor began to feel the shift. His grip was loosening. His control, though vast, was not absolute. He had miscalculated. Claire was not a threat because she was weak. She was a threat because she saw too clearly, and Kyle was no longer the boy seeking his father's approval. He was a man protecting the woman he chose. And in that transformation, a new war, quietly, began, one not fought with corporate takeovers or leaked documents, but with loyalty, defiance, and the kind of love that refuses to bend to manipulation. The lines were drawn. The rules had changed. And this time, Victor would not win so easily. Transcript unfolds a gripping narrative centered on the turmoil and deception swirling around the supposed deaths of Damian and Chance. Two men believed to have been murdered on a French estate. Genoa City mourns their loss, but beneath the surface, the truth is far darker and more complicated. Damian and Chance are alive, saved by a mysterious and unconventional doctor who operates from the shadows and has concealed them in a secret location, nursing them back to health while plotting revenge. Their survival is a fragile secret, protected by advanced security and a network of loyal allies who work covertly to gather evidence against their enemies Kane and Carter, who orchestrated the betrayal and violence. Damian is driven by fiery anger and a thirst for justice, while Chance approaches their predicament with strategic calmness and determination to restore balance. Both understand that returning to Genoa City prematurely would endanger their lives and jeopardize their mission. Meanwhile, chaos continues in the city as family members and associates, including Lily, Jill, Victor Newman, and Sharon, begin unraveling the tangled web of lies, manipulation, and betrayal that led to the violent night in France. Carter, the assassin, attempts to cover his tracks but unknowingly leaves traces that could destroy him. In parallel, the story shifts to Kyle and Claire, whose relationship is strained under the weight of grief and manipulation orchestrated by Victor and Audra. Kyle discovers Victor's manipulative schemes designed to isolate him from Claire and control his loyalties. Claire, initially quiet in her mourning, eventually confronts the betrayal with fierce resolve. United, Claire and Kyle decide to stand against Victor's control and Audra's provocations, marking the beginning of a new internal war within the Newman family, one fought with truth, loyalty, and defiant love. Together, these intertwined stories reveal a powerful drama of survival, deception, power struggles, and the relentless quest for truth and justice in a world shadowed by betrayal. Highlights: Damian and Chance, presumed dead, are secretly alive and hidden by a mysterious doctor. Damian's desire for revenge contrasts with Chance's calculated strategy for justice. The doctor's secret recovery facility is heavily fortified, emphasizing the danger they face. Key figures in Genoa City, including Lily, Jill, and Victor, begin uncovering inconsistencies about the French incident. Carter, the assassin, desperately tries to erase evidence but unknowingly leaves clues. Kyle and Claire's relationship is targeted by Victor and Audra's manipulation but grows stronger through truth. A new power struggle emerges within the Newman family, driven by loyalty and defiance against Victor's control. Key insights: the power of survival as a catalyst for justice. Damian and Chance's survival after a brutal attempt on their lives is not just a physical miracle but a pivotal turning point. Their hidden recovery symbolizes the resilience of truth and justice even when the world believes them dead. This plot device drives the narrative tension, underscoring how survival can empower victims to reclaim agency and confront their oppressors. Contrasting responses to trauma. Shape strategy. Damian's emotional fury and thirst for vengeance contrasts with Chance's calm, methodical approach to restoring order and protecting the innocent. This dichotomy highlights how trauma can manifest differently in individuals, one driven by raw emotion, the other by disciplined resolving a nuanced view of justice and retribution. The doctor as an enigmatic guardian and symbol of redemption. The unnamed doctor's role extends beyond medicine into the realm of covert protector and planner. His mysterious background, possibly linked to secretive military or pharmaceutical programs, adds layers of intrigue. More importantly, his personal vendetta against betrayal reflects how personal loss can motivate one to fight injustice indirectly, changing the course of others' lives. Manipulation and deception as tools of power. The narrative intricately explores how Kane, Carter, and Victor used lies, half-truths, and psychological manipulation to control people and outcomes. Carter's transformation from assistant to assassin illustrates the corrupting influence of power and betrayal. Victor's orchestration of Kyle and Claire's estrangement reveals how familial bonds can be weaponized. Within corporate and personal power struggles. The role of secrecy and surveillance in modern conflict. The doctor's fortress-like recovery chamber, complete with biometric locks and untraceable communication, illustrates the modern theme of surveillance and secrecy in protecting vulnerable individuals. This high-tech concealment emphasizes the stakes, showing that in contemporary conflicts, survival depends not just on strength but on information control and stealth. Love and truth as resistance against control. Kyle and Claire's evolving relationship symbolizes the triumph of transparency and mutual trust over manipulation. Their decision to confront Victor's schemes and Audra's provocations with unity and honesty provides a counterpoint to the deceit around them. Their story highlights how personal relationships can become bastions of resistance in environments rife with control and betrayal. The emergence of a new power dynamic. The final segments hint at a shifting balance of power within the Newman family. Victor's recognition that his old tactics may no longer work signals an impending conflict where traditional authority confronts emerging forces fueled by insight and defiance. This sets the stage for a broader narrative about the evolution of power and the limits of control in family and corporate dynasties. The transcript delivers a richly layered story that combines elements of suspense, emotional depth, and complex character dynamics, exploring themes of survival, betrayal, justice, and the ongoing battle for truth in a world dominated by manipulation and power struggles.